This show is dedicated to helping you strengthen your family tree and live financially free. Welcome to the Marriage, Kids, and Money podcast, everybody. This is Andy Hill, and today we're talking about student loans. Since our country is currently drowning in $1.5 trillion of student debt, it's fair to say that we have a big problem on our hands. The news media is even predicting it as the next financial crisis. Ugh. If you're listening to this, you may just be one of those many Americans that's feeling like they are completely underwater with these loans. Well, today I have a very special guest who's going to talk to us about our options to get rid of these bad boys as fast as possible. Travis Hornsby is here with us today. He is the founder of Student Loan Planner. This is a company focused on helping people figure out exactly what to do with their monster student loan debt. He's helped over 1,500 clients save over $80 million on their student loans. That is a crazy number. His advice and story has been featured in U.S. News, Business Insider, and Rolling Stone. Welcome to the show, Travis.
Great to be here, Andy.
Excellent. So, Travis, how did you decide to start this company of yours?
That's a great question. Out of necessity. My wife had med school loans, and at the time when I met her, she was my girlfriend, not my wife, and we had that money conversation like a lot of couples do when they're starting to get serious. And I said, here's my assets and liabilities, and this is, what my thoughts are about money. What are yours? And I think we mainly had this conversation because it was important to me, and she just sort of, humored me. And then she said, oh, by the way, I have no assets and I have a lot of liabilities. And I said, oh, shoot, how much? And she told me. And at the time, it seemed like a lot. What I know now is that her amount was very, very small for a physician. So she had $124,000 in medical school loans. And my thought process was, well, she's going to make a lot more money when she finishes her fellowship training. And she's going to make, more than double her income, hopefully. And then she'll be able to just pay that thing off in, a year or less. That was my thought process. But then I learned about income-driven repayment. I learned about loan forgiveness. I learned about refinancing. And then I found that it really wasn't as simple as I thought it was. So I made a spreadsheet for her, and then I shared that with some friends. And those friends were like, do what you did for her for me. And my wife was like, you should charge for this because this could be a business. And so I was like, oh, haha, funny. and I did that a little bit. And I started seeing the need was really great out there. And then I published the calculator on Business Insider, and then that's when everything went viral, and that's when the business really took off.
That's incredible. So you found a way to help your wife, then some friends, and then it turned into a business. That's fantastic. So talk about a little bit of those things that you did with your wife to help her eliminate. You said $124K, is that what it was?
Right.
Talk about those steps that you walked through. You started to mention some terms there that were flying over my head. So...
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so with student loans, if you have federal student loans, right, the government gives everybody the same interest rate, give or take. It's like 6 to 8%. And for somebody who got a degree in, something that's not a super economic kind of thing to study, that's actually a pretty low interest rate. But if you got a degree in engineering or medicine or something like that, then that interest rate could be artificially high. So one thing that you can do is refinance the debt. The other thing you can do is pay based on your income. And then a third thing you can do while paying based on your income is to seek loan forgiveness. And for physicians particularly, and this is true for anybody that's working in a not-for-profit or government employer, you can pay for 10 years based on your income. And at the end of those 10 years, the balance, if you have a balance, is forgiven tax-free. That's called the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program.
And that's for who you said for people who work for the government?
The government or a 501c3 not-for-profit.
Okay.
So that's about 25% of the American workforce.
Wow. Okay.
And the problem is you have to have the right kind of loans. You have to have direct loans, which were issued mostly after 2010. And if you don't have those kind of loans, you can make them. You can create them actually. You just have to actually do something called consolidation and take your old loans and turn them into the right kind of loans. So for my wife, she, at the time we met, she was in her final year of fellowship. So she had 7 years of training under her belt, and she needed to do 10 years of total service, right? And she'd been paying based on her income since the very beginning. So I thought, wow, She's got 7 years of credit towards this loan forgiveness program. If she makes 3 more years of payments that are going to be, about $1,200 a month, because they can cap it based off of the max payment that you'd make on a 10-year plan. If she makes 3 more years of those payments, we'll still have like $80,000 or $90,000 left over that'll get forgiven tax-free.
Wow.
And so I realized just in that moment when I realized that, I was like, wow, so if we had paid this back, we could have cost ourselves $80,000 or $90,000. But then I submitted all the paperwork for her, and we had to deal with this company called Fed Loan Servicing. And anybody who has student loans that knows what that name means probably just cringed right now. But that company came back and said, not only do you not have 7 years of credit towards the 10 that you need, on half of the loans you have 3 years of credit, and on the other half of loans you have 0 years of credit, which made no sense. And so it turns out that she got some bad consolidation advice when she finished her residency, and it turns out that she didn't consolidate soon enough on some other set of loans. So basically she had wiped away all the credit on her direct loans, and she had wiped away all the credit on her FFEL loans, which are the loans before 2010, which she had to have done, but she should have done it sooner. And so because of that, 0 years of credit on one set, 3 years of credit on the other set, it didn't really make sense for her to pursue that loan forgiveness program anymore.
Because the interest would keep piling up, and it would just get overwhelming?
Well, basically it was because if you have to pay on that 10-year plan that's capped for like 7 or 8 years, because of that high interest rate, she would have only had maybe $10,000 or $20,000 left over to forgive.
Okay.
And so then we're talking about spending a lot of our time, our resources, our mental energy trying to qualify for this loan forgiveness program that has a very small projected benefit. So I was pretty upset for her. She, I don't think, realized how much she got messed up with this. But I was basically thinking, goodness sakes, like this shouldn't happen to anybody else ever again.
I mean, honestly, what you were just describing, the process of what she might have done wrong or what she did do wrong, or the consolidation, that just sounds like you need a doctorate to figure all this stuff out. And
it's confusing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, it's confusing. And the PSLF program just had a report that the acceptance rate was 1% for people who applied. And it's basically because, I won't get into too much detail, but basically people didn't understand the directions and didn't understand the process of what qualifying for this program looks like. Now, if you follow the instructions and you follow the directions, you actually do qualify. And I know we'll get into that later, but it is very possible to get loan forgiveness. It's just you have to do everything the right way. And after doing that study, I realized that we were not going to get loan forgiveness really in a way that was going to help us. And so what we did is we decided to refinance her loan from a 6.8% rate to a 2.2% rate, and then we just paid it back in about 15 months.
Wow. So the $124K, that was at 6 3/4 or something like that.
Yeah, about that.
And then down to 2.2%. Okay. Wow. I mean, so after that refi, you guys just plowed through it. You said in 15 months.
Yeah, it was. Wow. It was pretty rapid. It was just very important to us to have it gone if we were not going to get loan forgiveness before we had kids.
Yeah. Wow. So, okay. So, I mean, this all come from this business, and everything that you're interested in here came from your personal need, obviously, and that's fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about that for couples. When people get together and they're starting to talk about marriage, what are some of these conversations that people should be having as they are thinking about walking down the aisle with this person and saying I do for the rest of their lives?
Sure. So, I mean, I'll break it up into two kinds of couples. So one kind of couple both has student loan debt, and in that case, you probably have a similar strategy. You want to make sure that you're on the same page as to what your plan is. So most of the time when I'm talking to two people that are married or getting married, or they both have student loan debt, I want to make sure that they're on the same page and they're going to pursue the same strategy. So that means the same payment plan, the same forgiveness or refinancing approach, just because the math makes it so that it's very important that they agree on the same approach. Now, the flip side is, and this is where the tension comes in, this is where the good interesting stories happen, is when somebody has a lot of student loan debt and the other person doesn't. So in that case, I'm going to give you an example. A veterinarian has $300,000 of student loan debt, and she earns $75,000 a year. That veterinarian is getting married to a corporate desk job kind of a person, and he has $80,000 income but no student loan debt. If they get married legally and turn in the paperwork, and they file jointly, married filing jointly for their income tax, then he has to pay on her student loan debt. Because they have to pay based on their income. When you get married, it's your joint marital income that they look at, unless you do married filing separately on the right payment plan. So I'm just going to pretend that they did IBR and she does the she's paying 15% of her income and they get married. Well, now he has to pay 15% of his income too. And one approach that they could take is, they could have a conversation about whether or not it makes sense to get legally married instead of spiritually married, which I've had a couple people make that decision because of the cost. They basically have the thought process that, my marriage is between, me and my spouse and our friends and family, or it's between, us and God, or it's between, it's just a sacred promise we make to each other. Like, there's different thoughts on this, but I've definitely had people that have decided to get married and not turn in the paperwork because of their student loan debt. I've even had people that decided to get strategically divorced because of their student loan debt. They were already married.
That is incredible. So student loans are affecting people so much that they are choosing whether or not to get married or divorce to make it a more advantageous situation to pay these things off.
Yeah, because say that veterinarian was getting married to let's just say a urologist making $300,000 a year. And in that case, married filing separately for income taxes would cost them probably 20 or 30 grand a year in income taxes. And so it doesn't make sense to file separately. If they file joint, they have to pay that $20,000 or $30,000 towards their loans every year. And because of that kind of situation, if she was single, then she could pay based on her income. And so over 20 years, she might only pay 100 grand on a $300,000 loan. And, there's you should have to pay income taxes in the forgiven balance. There's some complications to this. But basically, they would probably save $100,000 to $200,000, on her student loans from not being married. And, in that kind of a case, like I've had people that have been more of like the very cold, calculating, rational kind of folks that want to make the best financial decision. And this doesn't happen very often. I've only one or two cases out of 1,500, but they look at the math and they're like, so what you're saying is it makes no sense to be married under these student loan rules. And I was like, well, hold up. Like in very specific cases and in certain situations, that's the case. And I've had other people have that same situation and just say, well, that's fine. It looks like we just have to pay the loans off. Like that's been people's reaction too. It kind of depends on the couple, but it's very important to realize that there's huge implications for sending in your marriage certificate if you have a lot of student loan debt, whether or not you're, one person that has a lot of student loan debt or you both have it. And a lot of people don't realize that.
Because of the tax implications. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So you just kind of blew me back there for a bit there. Well, let's talk about these options then that we started to touch on a little bit at the top of the show. Let's talk through student loan forgiveness. So who is this for? You said it's for people who have a 501c3 organization that they work for or for the government. So that could be a university. That could be
hospital,
federal government, hospital, things like that. So who's it not for? Then I guess everybody else, right?
Well, so loan forgiveness is actually a lot broader than people realize.
Okay.
So I just mentioned a specific kind of loan forgiveness. So I'll try to simplify things. So people should generally be paying under one of two plans, either the revised pay-as-you-earn plan or the pay-as-you-earn plan if they're wanting to seek loan forgiveness. Those plans are not necessarily helpful for people who need to pay back their loans, but we're just talking about loan forgiveness for a second. So under those two plans, you can pay 10% of your discretionary income. So just pretend it's about 10%. And you're paying that basically for a certain number of years. Under this public service loan forgiveness program that has a lot of requirements, you can pay under one of those two plans for 10 years, and the balance is forgiven tax-free. So that's for about 25% of the workforce. Now, what about for everybody else, the other 75%? There's actually a loan forgiveness strategy for those people too, and it's called IDR loan forgiveness. And this is something that is open to everybody. IDR loan forgiveness is when you're paying on the pay or the repay programs for 20 to 25 years, depending on the plan. At the end of those 20 to 25 years, you have to pay income tax on the forgiven debt that's discharged. So, for example, say that veterinarian with $300,000 in debt, she pays $400 a month for 20 years under the pay-as-you-earn plan. At the end, she has $500,000 of student loan debt because it grew, and now she's got to pay $200,000 to the IRS all at once. Now, the reason why that's not terrifying is because, if you can pay $100,000 over 20 years, and then you can pay a lump sum $200,000 tax bomb, if you think about the cost of inflation and the fact that money is worth less and less over time, then the value of that strategy might only be half of what she actually owes in today's dollars, right? And so then that's a way to get some relief on a $300,000 loan balance that a lot of people under a traditional personal mindset mentality think that they have to pay back directly. So forgiveness,
I'd be worried if that were me. I'd be worried if the government would honor that 20 years later. I mean, there's so many changes in the government. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
So loan forgiveness has only become more and more generous over time. Go back to basically the 90s when they had income contingent repayment, and it was very difficult to access. And then in 2007, they passed public service loan forgiveness and income-based repayment, and then they actually made all that available starting in 2009. And then in 2013, they dropped the required payment from 15% to 10% under a new repayment plan. And then in 2016, they opened up another repayment plan that paid part of your interest for you. So there's a consistent history of the government becoming more and more generous, which kind of makes sense because I think that under a lot of these sort of entitlement programs, you would see an expansion in benefits, and then there's some sort of crisis. And then what they do is they grandfather in everybody that's already, on track for a certain promised benefit, and they just make it less generous for future recipients. So that kind of, I think, is where we're headed.
Like the future of Social Security then?
Exactly. I think this future of student loans is very similar to the future of Medicare and Social Security. That, the people that are already very close to the, to the exit are going to get the benefits that were promised. And I think the people that, there's been a lot of attempts to change the rules for people who are not yet in graduate school or undergrad. And those attempts so far have failed because obviously not a lot is getting done in Washington now.
Right.
So I think that's what's interesting about this is a lot of people express that fear. They fear the unknown, which is that they think the government's going to pull the rug out from under them. But the problem is over 2.7 million people owe more than $100,000 of student loan debt. So 2.7 million people in America owe a house, on their brain, and there's already about an 11% default rate, and I think about 40% of people paying back student loans are using like forbearance or deferment or in default or delinquency. So that's a staggering number of people. If the government pulled away income-based repayment, there would be a financial crisis.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's talk about default or delinquency. Like this is not a loan that you can just walk away from, right?
No, yeah. So the Congress passed special rules that make student loan debt the most difficult kind of debt in the world to discharge in bankruptcy. And if you think about it, if they allowed people to discharge their student loans in bankruptcy, everyone would default probably immediately, or a lot of people would, because if you can make it like a credit card where credit cards are settled for like 3 cents on the dollar, then why, if you made a lot of these decisions and taking out a lot of student loan debt, why would you pay it? You'd just try to file a bankruptcy and move on. And then, that would kind of expose the emperor has no clothes, and that would probably force changes to the system, which are needed. But so right now, the thing that people don't realize, though, is rather than being delinquent or defaulting or trying to declare bankruptcy, most people that are struggling like that have way more attractive options thanks to some of these income-based repayment programs they don't even know about.
Okay. All right. Well, let's keep talking about our options then. We talked about the forgiveness a little bit. Let's talk about refinancing. You said that worked for your wife. You went from the, almost 7% down to 2%. How does a process like that work? How is that attractive to the lenders?
Sure. So if you owe less than 1.5 times your income in debt, so I make $100,000 and I earn less than $150,000, and I work in the private sector, and and probably I'm not going to be switching to a government job anytime soon, then that person should refinance because you're not going to get any forgiveness. If you choose one of those income-based programs, you're just going to pay the whole thing back, and you're going to pay it back to the government at a rate of 6, 7, 8% when you could get a lower interest rate and get out of debt sooner. So in that kind of a case, you'd want to refinance. What I discovered when we refinanced my wife's student loans is that you can get a cashback bonus for refinancing. So part of what we do with our business is a lot of the people that just need to refinance and know that they need to refinance would just visit something like studentloanplanner.com/refi, REFI, and they just click our links and they get a cashback bonus. They comparison shop, and we don't actually ever talk to them. And that's fine. So what the reason that works is because, in other personal finance products, you might have affiliate links, people click on them, sites get compensation. What I've discovered is that the partners will allow you to give people even a majority of what you're earning on the click back to the reader in the form of the cashback bonus. So then you can really negotiate higher and higher cashback bonuses the more volume you send these lenders. So since we send the lenders a lot of cash back, a lot of volume, we've been able to negotiate those bonuses ever higher, where they're between like $200 and $1,000 now, and that's exciting because in a traditional sense, if you're trying to refinance your mortgage, you have to pay an appraisal fee, you have to pay probably some closing fees or some costs, right? And so with student loan refinancing, not only does it not cost you any money, but it actually costs you negative money. And the reason why this makes sense for a lender, because obviously what's the catch? Why are they so willing to do this? It's simply from a risk perspective, the government's charging an artificially high price. So, imagine everybody's getting charged the same price and the lenders can come out and cherry pick the people who are the best risks, which is what they're doing. Then they realize that the 10-year treasury bond gives the 3%. So if they can make a 10-year loan to a physician at 5%, then that's super attractive for them, right? Because they're getting a 5% loan on that when maybe if they lend to a risky company, they might lend to a risky company at, 4% or 4.5%. So they're getting even more yield to lend to somebody who's probably safer than a lot of the people they're lending money to. So that's why they're interested in doing it. It's basically a market inefficiency that the government hasn't eliminated yet.
So what's the qualification process then? A good credit score? I have a good job with a great income, and I'm just looking to pay these things down. What is the qualification when I go through to refinance my loan?
Yeah, you just need a debt-to-income ratio below 2 to 1. That's one thing that's helpful, at least. And then for a credit score, you really only need something above a 650. And if you have those two things, you will probably get approved somewhere. So, I would say that you only want to refinance, though, if you're really confident that that's the right thing to do, and the payment will be really easy for you to make. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I see people do is they'll do a 10 or a 15-year loan to start because the required payment is smaller, and they'll make extra payments and pay down more of the principal balance than they have to, according to the term of the loan. And then they can actually refinance again and pick up another cashback bonus and cut the loan term to like 5 or 7 years. So that's called a Refi Ladder. So that's something that more and more people should do. I did a study of my readers, and I asked them what kind of lower interest rate they need to refinance again. And first of all, half of them didn't even know they could refinance twice or 3 times. And then of those people, I think the total number was 60% of people said they would need an improvement in their interest rate of more than 2% to refinance again.
Wow.
And so they say refinance your mortgage if you can get a 1% interest savings. And that has a lot of costs to it. Mm-hmm. Refinancing has negative costs to it, and people don't want to refinance unless they get 2% or more savings. So it's really amazing to me how little people understand about that process.
So with the Refi Ladder, then, do you have to switch from company to company, or can you go SoFi again and SoFi again? How does that work?
See, right. So generally company to company, because the company itself won't want to give you the better deal, right?
Right.
And that's the one that SoFi is the one everybody knows about. We've got eight other lenders on our site that people don't even know about, and most people, about 40% of people, just shop at one place, which is also staggering to me. Like if you're going to buy a Ford Explorer, you wouldn't go to one place and ask what's the price, right? Especially on something that's even more expensive, like a student loan. So basically you just want to make sure you shop out, I say, at least 3 places. And then when you do the Refi Ladder, you can apply, other places. And if you get a lower rate, you can refinance again. And sometimes the company you're already with will just say, hey, to keep your business, we'll just give you that rate and that term to make it easy.
Okay. Well, let's say there's somebody listening right now and they say, you know what? this sounds really difficult and confusing. I'm just going to buckle down and pay this thing off. I'm going to live on, a lot of Dave Ramsey fans here. I'm going to live on beans and rice and pay this thing down. What is your thought on that process?
Well, I had a case very similar to this yesterday, and they had about $300,000 of federal student loans. They had about $100,000 of private student loans. And yes, and they were
sorry,
both
I'm grabbing my heart right now. Everybody's not seeing us on video.
And they were both, they were both making about 60,000-70,000 in the healthcare space. And they had done a great job. They had no credit card debt. They had good savings, about $15,000-$20,000 in savings. And their thought was, well, we just need to, beans and rice and pay it all back. And what I showed them was that forgiveness math on the federal student loans would cause them to save about $150,000. And so if they had paid on their federal student loan debt, they'd be costing themselves long-term $150,000. And, instead of making that kind of aggressive approach on that kind of debt, the private student loan debt, they did need to take that mentality too, because in their case, their debt to income ratio was so high, and nobody would agree to refinance their private loan. Mm-hmm. And you can't bankrupt a private loan. So, they were dealing with $1,000 a month payments on this private student loan on top of their federal student loan payments, and they were trying to start a family at some point soon. And so they were under so much stress. And so I said, well, here's the thing. You do have the right mentality. I like that mentality. But, one thing that I can say is you get really emotionally motivated to pay back debt. But if you don't have a plan, it's kind of like walking straight into a machine gun, And so you have to tackle the private debt first in their case. I told them to be super aggressive with that. And then when they're done with that, they will have $1,000 a month payment that they no longer have to fight back against. And then that $1,000 a month payment is probably half of the way to covering their daycare expense. So I kind of framed that as a challenge, as an obstacle that they needed to tackle, preferably first before, having a baby, since that was probably a couple of years away anyway. And they were really on board with that. They were really excited. So yes, you can pay back your debt, but you have to make sure you're paying the right kind of debt. And if you're not paying the right kind of debt, then you're just going to cost yourself a lot of money and delay things like retirement, buying a house, starting a family that are more important than just being debt-free just to say that you're debt-free.
Right. Yeah, when you started to talk about, and I've read this on your site a little bit, all these young families or young couples that are just putting off having kids because there's so many obstacles ahead of them. How much are you hearing about that with the clients that you're talking to, and how big of a conversation is that?
It's a huge conversation, huge. Now, if you think about, having kids biologically, right? A professional woman that has a lot of student loan debt she's under a lot of stress under her career. Women disproportionately bear the brunt of the household chores, even though they shouldn't. It's so you already have all this stress, right? So take away student loan debt from the picture. There's already things that would cause someone who doesn't feel like she has enough support to want to have a lot of children. And then you factor in the student loan debt too. Now you have this huge financial stress that that prevents you from having kids, or at least it feels like that. And there's so many things just flying in the face of somebody who wants to have a family, especially a large one. And also housing costs are higher than they were for our parents' generation. So there's definitely some major challenges. I like to joke that if you have a child, it'll save you about $50 a month on your student loan payment, because they'll reduce it. But you'll cost yourself about $2,000 in daycare and diaper bills. But the nice thing is, really, if somebody wants to have a child, the student loan debt should never ever be an obstacle. If you feel like there's a financial obstacle because of the student loan debt, that's because you haven't looked at your budget close enough. So there's definitely something going on in your budget that you could interchange or swap out or eliminate and replace that expense with children if they're important. It just depends on what is the most important thing to you. And for some people, their most important thing is freedom and enjoying themselves, and they don't want to have kids. They don't feel called to that, and that's totally fine. There's no problem with that. And some people, that's what they want more than anything in the world. So if you want that child more than anything in the world, but you're spending money on a car loan, well, that's not a not a decision that aligns with your values. And you can do a lot of things that can eliminate that car loan and free up probably $1,000 to $1,500 a month that can go into covering that cost of children. Same thing with other expenses. Like we don't even realize what we're spending money on. I could go off on this way too long, but basically, you want to have it tracked in a budget app. You need a budget or mint.com, and if you do that, you'll spend 40% less.
I love it. I love it. Is that something that you and your wife have discussed with your family and planning, things like that?
Oh yeah. So we decided to put our money where our mouth was, and we're using You Need a Budget right now. And it was a little confusing at first, but just being able to have a conversation starter around what are our goals and what do we care about and what are we funding and what are we giving for charity. We have this really messy spreadsheet that of giving for charity, and we're trying to get it all like reconciled so we can send it to our accountant. And it's like, wow, if we tracked this in an online budgeting app, this would be a heck of a lot easier, And it's it's cool too to just be organized. And we only been married for a little over a year, so we still have some separate accounts we're trying to like figure out. And it's just a great relationship builder and conversation starter when you have the same goals and you have the same path you're swimming down. So I think that I would just encourage any young married couple out there, or somebody who's going to get married, to take advantage of doing some of these budgeting apps, and it's just a wonderful thing to do.
Also a great way to just connect with your spouse too on your future plans, your dreams, whether a family is an important thing in the future, just kind of putting out there your financial goals and collaborating. So very, very good point. So Travis, I have a question for you. I guess it's kind of twofold. If your wife could go back to the beginning of college and do things all over again, now knowing what she knows more now with all these situations, what do you think she might have done differently? And I guess I'm putting that in perspective of, the people who have maybe teens right now that are like, all right, I'm about to put my children through this mess or whatever this is. How could I do things the right way? And I guess from your wife's perspective, maybe that would be a good way to think about it.
Well, this is going to be pretty bad because what she should have done is because she wants to go into academic medicine, or that was her goal from the very beginning, she should have taken out way more debt. And her parents helped her out a lot with the cost of tuition and living expenses and rent and those kind of things. And really, that money would all have been able to have been kept by them if they had realized that she could use the PSLF program. And so when she graduated medical school, she would have consolidated the debt right away and got everything on the right income-driven repayment program. She would have sent in her PSLF forms to get tracked right away. And then when she had graduated fellowship, she would have only had 3 more years to go to get that loan forgiveness benefit. And so she would have probably owed $200,000 or $250,000. She would have lived in a nicer place, gone out to eat more with friends. And instead of getting nothing forgiven, she would have gotten $200,000, $250,000 forgiven. And obviously, anyone listening that doesn't have student loan debt, that doesn't understand the psychological burden, or maybe they do have it, but they just think that's crazy. Yes, I mean, I agree, it's kind of crazy, but that's what our system is built up to reward right now. So that's just the reality of what the rules are right now. Is basically it's a system that rewards taking out as much debt as possible because you're going to pay not very much of it. And wow. Yeah, so that's what she would have done, is actually be less responsible with her debt. Now, if somebody wants to be very responsible on the front end, and not have to rely on these government forgiveness programs, what I would say to you is do not do a master's or graduate degree program just because you think that it's the next step. I had somebody the other day that she was somebody actually that was on my podcast, and she was basically saying that she graduated with a film degree and she didn't know what to do, so she had a really great class with this attorney, and she thought it would be really neat to go to law school to become an entertainment attorney. And so she went to law school and racked up $300,000 of student loan debt at one of these, very high cost private schools. Yeah. And she ended up getting a job that she could have gotten without a law degree anyway. And, the law school education helped, but it was not worth $300,000. And she expressed that living in New York was really fun and those kind of things. Well, for that kind of a person, take some savings, or, take a job doing something to get some early, savings built up in the bank, 20, 30, 40,000. and then just quit your job and go traveling for a while and go live in a city you've always wanted to live in, and take some sort of waiting tables kind of job just to survive, and try to have a lot of free time and enjoy yourself and read and go to the library and reflect on things. So I would say actually avoid education in a lot of cases. If you think that you just have to have a next step, you don't. Take a year or two, delay that decision, and see if that's really what you want to do. So that's one big suggestion. And if you know for sure that all you want to do is become a physician or a pharmacist or an attorney or something like that, then go to the cheapest school that you possibly can go to. If you want to have a traditional, healthy financial kind of setup where you don't have to use someone like me's services, seriously, people are going to take out a lot of debt without me helping them, but I can help people not take out a lot of debt by giving them some of this advice in the front end. So, in that case, go to the cheapest school that you can go to and try to live super frugally and everything, and go to the school that gives you the best scholarship package too. Don't really get so caught up in the in the name brand of the school or the location. The price is the most important thing.
Okay, and then there's somebody listening right now and says, okay, that's fantastic. I've already got $200,000 in student loans. What's the one piece of advice you'd leave with them today? The first thing that they should do after listening to the show?
I would say do not put your head in the sand and pretend it's going to go away. This problem will only get worse the more you ignore it. So take it seriously and take advantage of all the resources out there that exist to help you so that you do not pay hundreds of thousands of dollars when you don't need to.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's give them another resource to check out. So where can people connect with you and learn more about Student Loan Planner?
Sure. So obviously the site, studentloanplanner.com, has got tons of resources. We've got a blog with a ton of different categories that probably fits your profession. So check that out. And then if you want to reach out about your specific situation, you can contact us at help@studentloanplanner.com. And one of us will get in touch with you, and we'll just tell you what we think that you should do, whether it's the refinancing path or if it's booking a custom plan.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for your time today, Travis. This was an enlightening topic for me. I did not know a lot about this. I did have student loans in my life, but not to the extent of some of the monster debt that is out there right now. That's quite frightening. So thank you for doing what you're doing, helping people out. It's a lot. It's a lot of people. You said over, was it 2.7 million have over 100,000 in loans right now? Is that what you said?
Yeah, and that's doubling every probably 5 years or so.
Wow. Okay, well, it's only going to grow. Well, keep doing what you're doing, man. Thank you so much for being on the show today. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Andy.